Okay, class, today we're going to review solving equations, okay, with a twist. So what are the three steps that we use in order to solve an equation? Well, the first step should be get the letters on one side of the equal sign. How do we do that? We add the opposite. Second step, get the numbers together on the other side. How do we do that? We add the opposite. And the last thing is solve. How do we do that? We do the opposite. So let's go back and review some of the things that we've done in the past. We're going to go all the way back to one-step equations. Okay? So let's just do a real quick review. So in this first one, we've got g plus 6 is equal to negative 10. So our goal is to get this g by itself. Now, yes, you should be able to do a one-step problem in your head. Okay? The point is not to just solve this in our head. Yes, you should be able to do that, but the process is what's important. So here I need to get rid of this 6. So I'm going to do that by adding the opposite. So g plus 6 plus negative 6 is equal to negative 10. And if I add something to one side, I have to add it to the other to maintain balance. So plus negative 6 on this side as well. So we end up with g is equal to negative 16. Now if we have a multiply or a divide, we do the opposite. So here's a multiply by 3. So we do a divide by 3 in order to undo that. Because I don't want to know about 3 t's, I want to know about one of them. So I divide t by 3, I end up with t is equal to, and 15 divided by 3 gives us 5. Okay, let's bump it up a notch. Let's look at two-step equations. Okay, well with two-step equations, we just have to do both of those steps together. Okay, so in this first one, the first thing I'm going to do, as I've done in the past, I'm going to change subtraction to addition next to its opposite. Now, my goal is to get this letter by itself, but what we start with is getting rid of all of our add subtract. Okay, so we start with getting rid of the negative 12. So we do that by doing 4g plus negative 12 plus its opposite is equal to 8 plus 12 because we add the opposite to both sides. So the 12s zero out and we end up with 4g is equal to 20. Now to get rid of the multiply by 4, I do a divide by 4 and you end up with g is equal to 5. And if we were to take that 5 and plug it back into g, we could get the right answer. So we'd end up with 4 times 5 to get 20. And if I subtract 12 from that, I do get 8. And that proves that my answer is correct. Now in this one, we're going to do the same thing. We start by getting rid of the 4. Okay, so we have an r divided by 3 plus 4 plus negative 4 is equal to 10 plus negative 4 because we add the opposite to both sides. So we end up with r divided by 3 is equal to 6. Now how do I get rid of a divide by 3? Well, we do a multiply by 3. So I put a 3 beside, okay, the r. Okay, so that means I put a 3 beside the 6. And I end up with r is equal to 18. Because this basically says I'll have a 1/3 of an r. So what do I have to do to change 1/3 into a 1? I need to have 3 of them. Okay, so that's how we do two-step equations. So now let's bump it up. Okay, so this is with variables on both sides. So this is where we go back to these steps that we talked about at the very beginning of the video. Get the letters on one side of the equal sign, get the numbers on the other side. We do both of those by adding the opposite, and then we solve. Okay, so I need to get my letters on one side. The majority of the time I like my letters to be over here on the left. So I start over on the right. And I write w plus negative w, and then plus negative 6. And so this is the new thing that I added. So I add the same thing over on this side. So I end up with 3w plus negative w plus the 8 that's there. So now we do the math. So on the left-hand side here, I've got 3w and negative 8, which gives us 2w plus 8 is equal to, and on this side, my w's zero out, and I'm left with negative 6. So now, if you'll notice this, looks just like one of these two-step equations. So now I get the 8 on the other side by adding its opposite. So 2w plus 8 plus negative 8 equals negative 6 plus negative 8. Okay, so we end up with 2w is equal to negative 14. Then I divide both sides by 2. And we end up with w is equal to negative 7. And if I plug the negative 7 into both of these spots where w is at, do the math, we would find out that they are equal. So that is a multi-step equation, okay, with variables on both sides. So now, what if I added yesterday's stuff in, dealing with the distributive property? So in a problem like this, we first have to do the distributive property, then I can start solving for the variable. So in this one right here, I'm going to pass the 4 out to the x to get 4x, pass the 4 out to the 2 to get 8, which is then equal to, pass the 2 out to the 3x, and I end up with 6x plus, and then pass the 2 out to the -1. After I change the minus to a plus next to its opposite, we end up with -2. Now you'll notice that this problem looks just like this problem. Okay, so now I get my letters on one side, so we'll take this 6x, move them over to be with the 4x. Now, some of you are getting sharp enough that you don't have to start over here. I know I'm moving the 6x over with the -6x, so I can just write 4x plus -6x, because I know that's what I'm going to add to this side. Plus 8 equals 6x plus -6x, which is the 6x I added on the other side, plus -2. Now we simplify. So I end up with -2x plus 8, which is equal to, let's go away, -2. Now this problem looks just like one of these two-steppers. Right? So now I get the 8 over to be with the -2. So -2x plus -8, oh excuse me, plus 8 plus its opposite of -8 equals -2 plus -8. So we end up with -2x is equal to -10. Divide both sides by -2. We end up with x equals +5. So as you notice, all of the equations kind of build. Okay, they build upon each other. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on today, solving those kind of questions. Then we got one more question real quick, an application question. This one says the perimeter of a rectangle is 80 feet. Find the dimensions if the length is 5 feet longer than 4 times the width. Okay, so I know I've got a rectangle. Okay, and I know perimeter, or the distance around it, is 80 feet. Now, what do I know? I know the dimensions, okay, of this. The length is 5 feet longer than 4 times the width. So that means the width is our variable, w. And the length is done in terms of the width. And it says that the length is 5 feet longer, plus 5, than 4 times the width, 4w. Okay, so there is the length and width. Now we're looking for perimeter. We know perimeter is 80 feet. So I want to know what is the w for this. What is the length and width? What are the dimensions? So if it's perimeter, then I know that this has got to be a w, and this has got to be a 4w plus 5. And I know I have to add all of those together in order to be able to find the perimeter. So basically what this is 4w plus 5 plus 4w plus 5 plus w equals 80. And now we go back to yesterday's lesson about combining like terms. And we have a 4w, a 4w, a w, and a w, which gives us 10w total. Plus, and then the 5 and the 5 gives us a 10, and that's equal to 80. And now you'll notice this is just a two-step equation. Move the 10 to be with the 80, so 10w plus 10 plus -10 equals 80 plus -10, so 10w equals 70. Divide both sides by 10, w is equal to 7. Now the question said, what are the dimensions? So I know the width is equal to 7 feet. But now what about the length? I know the length is 4w plus 5. So that means we're going to have 4 times 7 plus 5. Okay, so the length then is equal to 4 times 7 is 28. 28 plus 5 is 33. So this is 33, this is 33, this is 7, and this is 7. You add all that together and you end up with 80 feet. And that's how you deal with solving equations.